you have a responsibility to be generous, to be kind, to be soft, is his phrase, in your dying. Hello, welcome back to No Script, an unscripted conversation about theater's best scripts. I'm Jacob. As always, I'm here with Jackson, and today we are discussing a strange play, a philosophical play, a supernatural play, a play with split subjectivity, a play with characters whose names are their identifiers. It's one of those kinds of plays and one of those kinds of conversations, as today we are talking about Irish playwright Marina Carr's famous play, Woman and Scarecrow.
Yes, Woman and Scarecrow today. I love all those descriptors because like it's a strange play in that like it is wild, and some like sort of mythic qualities are there. But in the reading of it, at least, I bought in so fast. I was like, okay, yeah. So
yeah, you do very quickly. You're like, oh, the Scarecrow's part of her. Okay,
yeah,
great,
got it. Yep.
I'm in. She's talking to herself the whole play. I'm on.
Death's in the closet. Okay,
sounds great. It's funny. I was reading obviously various reviews and such as we do to prepare, and one of them that I read talked about how the creature in the closet, which for our listeners that don't know what we're talking about, we'll get to it eventually. There's a creature in the wardrobe. How the creature in the wardrobe was kind of a bold or risky choice on Marina Carr's part because otherwise the play, this reviewer said, the play is more or less realism. And I had to sit back and be like, that is interesting. If you mean realism as a style, it's a bedroom, it's two people who appear to be people talking, and then two other people who come in and talk. What I think that reviewer meant is that the Scarecrow figure doesn't necessarily visually appear to be supernatural, and thus the conversation appears to be between like real people in a real bedroom. These are everyday workaday kind of folks. In that way, it's realism, but in the sense that the Scarecrow is a real person, and I don't even know what I would mean by real in that sentence. Like the Scarecrow is a non-realistic figure presented as a realistic human being.
At least to the woman.
Sure, yeah. Right, yeah, and totally not there at all to the other people who come in the room.
Right, yeah. No, that's interesting for sure that like this play can read and does read for a long time. Is like, is this just like, a scene by a deathbed? And the kind of slow reveal that there's more going on. And it
actually is. Yeah, that is just what it is in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited for the conversation, especially the wondering around like sort of what Scarecrow is. Scarecrow certainly represents some things, but also, could have some like things that Scarecrow like definitely is if you wanted to take a perspective on that. So yeah, I'm excited for the kind of, I imagine that's what a lot of post-show conversation is about. So
and you know what's interesting is that there's also some things that Scarecrow definitely is not. And perhaps Marina Carr would not appreciate this commentary, in which case I apologize on the front end. But I will say, it does feel like one thing Scarecrow definitely is not is a scarecrow.
Isn't that interesting?
I cannot fathom, and perhaps I just have not looked at enough production photos and I'm just ignorant enough of the production history, but I can't really fathom costuming or otherwise aesthetically presenting the figure called Scarecrow as a scarecrow.
Yeah.
That doesn't, I don't think that is right, at least in my reading of it.
Yeah, certainly not like Wizard of Oz
right
style.
What is, they have straw sticking out of their sleeves? What they're like, they look like they're made of like terry cloth or something. Like, I don't think that doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah, the reversal of what Scarecrow is towards
it's
the
like
end
a
of the play.
twist.
It's a big twist, and so I think that's certainly playing into some of the character names for the play. But
And
yeah,
you're
no.
right that the mythic quality does, like the sort of
Mhm.
I read an interview where she talked about the haunting quality of scarecrows in the field,
Yeah.
the way that they
Mhm.
look, and actually, like even a show like Wicked kind of plays on the fact that
Yeah.
scarecrows are kind of a an uncomfortable, like it looks like a human body strung up on a pole in the field, right? Like that there
Yep.
is a spooky, frightening quality to what a scarecrow is that I suspect, at least in that snippet of an interview, that particular one that I read talked about the inspiration. Apparently, the title comes first. That's the story for Marina Carr of this play. Came up with the
Hmm.
title "Woman and Scarecrow," which I'll say this once and then we will move on. Great title.
Great
This
title.
this gets the A+ title seal of approval for me. I love this
Yeah.
title. It's intriguing. It's weird. It pulls you in.
Mhm.
I'm all for it.
Yep, sets the table well for the engagement between these two. Yeah, excited for the conversation today. Before we jump into continuing the conversation, want to take a second and say thank you to all of our patrons over at patreon.com/noscriptpodcast for being patrons of the show. Thank you all so much for being sure that we're able to have these sorts of conversations. The patrons make it happen over there. So if you're a longtime listener or a new listener and just looking for a new way to engage with what we're doing here at No Script, you can head on over to patreon.com/noscriptpodcast and you'll find a number of different tiers of patronship over there. Lowest one is just $1, $12 over the course of a year. Get access to patron only posts and kind of inside knowledge on what's happening over there, and a number of different tiers for you to look at as well. Thank you to everyone who's already made the decision to do so. You make this show possible, and we will see you over at patreon.com/noscriptpodcast.
And now back to the script.
Here we go.
Okay, so Marina Carr, new playwright to the podcast. Carr is an Irish playwright, as I've already said. Our focus tends to be on American playwrights, so that would explain why we've not come to Marina Carr, who is one of the world's leading dramatists. For a while, she was called Ireland's leading woman playwright, a title that she, I think, heartily objected to, mostly the word woman being included in there. She's fond of saying, why wouldn't they just call me one of Ireland's best playwrights instead of best women playwrights? To which I can only say, totally correct. That's that's right. I agree with you completely, Marina Carr. See if this sounds right, given the play that we've just read, Jackson. Marina Carr's parents were a playwright and a poet.
Oh, interesting.
Does that seem like it has something to do with what we got going on in this play?
A little apropos.
Yeah, a little playwriting, a little poetry, a little imagery sewn together in action. Absolutely. Went on to attend University College in Dublin, and then goes on to have just. Carr has a remarkably robust, internationally acclaimed playwriting career. Writer in residence at the famous Abbey Theatre in Dublin, been a lecturer and a professor variously at Trinity College Dublin, Princeton, Villanova, Dublin City University. She's had her work produced by Druid, Landmark, Royal Court, RSC, the McCarter Theatre, Milwaukee Rep, San Diego Rep, the Abbey Theatre. Her plays have been translated into languages all around the globe. She's won the Dublin Theatre Festival's Best New Irish Play Award, the Susan Smith Blackburn Prize, a prize that we've talked about many times on this podcast, the Irish Times Playwriting Award, the E.M. Forrester Award, the Wyndham Campbell Literature Award, which is given out of Yale. I mean, just one of the most well-lauded, most produced, best leading dramatists in the world right now. And her plays are known for being strange. They're known for having female characters at the heart of them. Leading characters in her plays tend to be women. She's known for adapting mythic qualities. One of her best known plays is a kind of loose adaptation of Medea, for example. I mean, this is the mythic qualities of ancient stories as they appear and have relevance in contemporary society, especially contemporary Irish society, is what Marina Carr does, and that, I mean, is absolutely at play in Woman and Scarecrow. I mean, there's no real question about that, I don't think. Woman and Scarecrow received its world premiere at the Royal Court Theatre in London in 2006 and went on to just have many fabulous productions around the world. 2009 at Solas Noir, I apologize for mispronouncing that, I'm sure, an Irish organization located in Washington, D.C., at Prime Cut Productions, which did a tour. They're based in Belfast, but they toured around the UK. In 2010 at the Victorian in Denver, at Villanova in 2011, at the Pittsburgh International Classic Theatre, the PICT, in 2011, at the Peacock Theatre in London in 2012. There was a tour in 11 and 12 by Blood in the Alley Productions all around Ireland. Princeton did it as part of their 2012-2013 season. The famous production that you'll find a lot of material on, at least in the States, is a production by the Irish Repertory Theatre, which is an off-Broadway theater in New York City, in 2018. So like a full 12 years after it had been written, it gained kind of another wave of fame and prominence due to this pretty major off-Broadway production, the pictures of which look fabulous. It goes on in 2019 at the Eris Theatre in Atlanta, at the Irish Heritage Theatre in Philadelphia, at Yale, and at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London. Like many playwrights who work in kind of a non-realistic form, Marina Carr talks about being heavily influenced by Beckett, and a lot of that work tends to be done at university, so her plays have a pretty robust university production life, but then also have this pretty high-end professional theater, especially internationally, a run. Her plays are about really interesting people in these unusual situations, and they have managed to capture attention from theater goers, kind of all kinds. She just simply is a fabulous playwright. It's a delight to talk about Marina Carr today.
Excited for the continued conversation. I'm going to give us just a brief summary of this play, and I think it's going to be brief today. So I'm excited to kind of jump into it, so I'll keep it as short as I can. This play takes place in a bedroom. In Ireland somewhere, sort of nondescriptly in Ireland. The setting
definitely not near the sea, because the woman talks about how they never went back to the sea. And I will say that's my last note about Marina Carr. A lot of her plays take place. A scholar, I think this was Mary Noonan, who I read an article, a journal article by, that talked about how many of Marina Carr's plays take place with women characters and in relationship with the water. In some way, that's kind of a reoccurring motif across Carr's work. And so this particular character is always longing to go back to the sea, talks about the regret of a life where they didn't go back. So they're somewhere in Ireland, not near the sea, it appears to me.
Right. Yes. And that's interesting too, with the repeated mentions of like crossing the Shannon River. That's kind of a continued line throughout the play. The setting for this play, or the time of this play in the script, is now, / present.
Jackson's laughing because I'm shaking my head.
There's really only two elements of this play that date it at all, though, and they're very easily dealt with. One of them is a CD player is used. You could very easily use any sort of thing that plays MP3s or Spotify or whatever to do those sorts of scenes. The other one is a mention of a horse and buggy for her funeral, which is as out of place in 2006 when the play was written in the now as it would be now. So
yeah, I have to imagine at least some of that's like a cultural situation around death and funerals that, just to be really honest with you, we just don't have in the United States in the same way. Our relationship with people who've died and with like public displays of grief and mourning are not even remotely the same, especially of Irish culture. A lot of my dissertation was on grief and mourning, and the idea of like the Irish tradition of keening and things like that. So the idea that the horse and buggy would be involved in the funeral even in 2026, I think is not, it makes total sense.
For sure. So the play, though, as has kind of already been hinted at, focuses on the dying of the character named Woman. Woman is in bedridden, some sort of terminal illness that is taking her earlier than many would be taken. It's not really described exactly how old she is.
So the only things that we would have are that she has 8 children. The youngest of those children still can't read. She talks
Mm-hmm.
about that, having to teach the youngest child to read. So that dates it, that puts her in a certain age range. And then at one point she believes she might be pregnant. Now, a different character in that scene suggests that she might be too old to be pregnant, but the woman seems pretty convinced that she is. Now, maybe you say that that is a hallucination or a psychosis or something brought on by the dying, maybe. But she also says if it's not pregnancy, then maybe it's the onset of menopause. So
Mm.
she's somewhere in that age range.
Yep, yep. And she's in this scene with a character that in the script is called Scarecrow. Now it's a little while before, not too long, but it's a little while before that word is used. And so for a while, it sort of seems like she's having this conversation with this other woman who is in the room with her. And they're kind of reflecting on her dying. A lot of this play is reflecting on her dying and on her life and what exactly she did with her life. There's 2 other characters that come into the scenes frequently. There is the character named Him, who is woman's husband, or kind of on the way to being ex-husband. But he kind of comes in and out of the scene in kind of like a sort of a caretaker, but also antagonist sometimes. He remarks that the wake downstairs is getting a lot to handle, and her whole family is there kind of basically waiting for her to die, and she has not yet died. And so he kind of comes in often, and there's some more conversation that I'll get to between them. There's also Auntie Ah, who is one of woman's aunts, and she comes into the room frequently and checks in on woman as well. The play takes place over 2 acts, and they're all very reflective acts of this woman kind of processing, mostly with Scarecrow, but sometimes with Auntie Ah, or sometimes with him, her life and her dying, and kind of wondering whether she lived well or lived in the way that she wanted to live, and sometimes mourning straight up the fact that she didn't live in a manner that she wanted to live. As slowly we learn more and more about her life, oftentimes Scarecrow is in this posture of like, I don't know why I like spent this much energy on you, Scarecrow will say, or like, you should have chosen this thing differently, if only we had done this differently. And woman has her reasons for all the things that she talks about, including things like staying with him, her husband, for her whole marriage, the way that she engaged life kind of centered around her 8 kids, the grief of losing the one kid that she did in childbirth. All of these sort of elements of her life are kind of brought up and processed, including her early childhood. She processes with Auntie Ah. So that happens throughout, and we'll get into some of those scenes certainly in our conversation. As far as the action of the play goes, just to kind of get us into that conversation, though, across the acts, she slowly gets worse and worse. In fact, there's this sort of ominous presence in the closet throughout, this sort of sometimes indistinctly voiced presence, sometimes like a kind of deathly wing stretches out of the closet, sometimes a talon or a claw reaches out of the closet, and Scarecrow kind of heads over there every once in a while to stop it. The woman comments on it. Notably, we begin to determine quickly that neither Auntie Ah or him can see Scarecrow. In fact, Scarecrow chimes into conversations that woman and him or Auntie Ah are having often, and they can't hear Scarecrow. Neither can they see the death that is waiting in the closet as well. Act 2 starts with a visceral struggle happening in the closet, which eventually, once Auntie Ah leaves the room, Scarecrow steps out saying that she has basically like either fought with or given something of herself to death in order for woman to have another 30 minutes of life. And so that's kind of Act 2, is those extra 30 minutes of life. Throughout the end of that second act, there begins to be more and more disagreement between Scarecrow and Woman to the end result of Scarecrow eventually leaving the room, and kind of leaving Woman alone. She has another conversation with him as well as with Auntie Ah before she begins to feel like she is dying, and she calls out to Scarecrow. Is like, I can't do this alone, Scarecrow, where are you? And out of the closet steps like a resplendent crow, maybe. A version of death, wreathed in regal crow-like costuming, wings and like a crow's head and talons. And it turns out that this crow is in fact Scarecrow.
So yeah, again, I'm quoting here from Mary Noonan from that journal article. She says both swans and crows symbolize death and the afterlife in myth and folklore. The crow, the harbinger of death, a creature of Celtic mythology, a war goddess bringing premonitions of a warrior's death, often appearing on the battlefield in form of a crow, taking the soul of the dead warrior to the underworld. So, in using the crow figure as the death representation, it might be comparable to like if there were an American writer doing a version of this play, having like a black robed figure haunting in the wardrobe. It's a very clear image of death, or the person that carries one to death. So that the crow being strange and frightening and mysterious in the wardrobe, it's maybe more familiar than we read it. So then the fact that Scarecrow is the crow, the thing in the closet, is a twist that I think would be more recognizable in other contexts. That it's not that we didn't understand what the crow was and now it's Scarecrow. It's that we thought we knew, and now we think something else.
Yep. And there's lots of like kind of fun wondering that I'm excited to do about that. Like, what was Scarecrow fighting in the closet?
Was it fake?
Yeah. So anyway, this last scene, just to kind of get us into the conversation. This last scene is kind of like, it winds up being like this sort of very next door to absurd exit interview that Scarecrow kind of takes Woman through. She ends up like plucking out one of the feathers that she wears and like dipping it in Woman's blood to like write out this exit interview of Woman kind of in her last processing moments of life as she slowly again over the course of this whole play, but really in this last scene, slowly slips away with various degrees of poetic reflection on her life and her eventual move towards death. And that, in a very general sense, is the structure of this play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that one other thing that is kind of mysterious about the play that we don't know, then that, to be clear, I think we are intended not to know, is like, why is Woman dying? Various people have proposed that it might be cancer, it might be a long illness. All those may very well be true. I think the truth is that we just don't know. Various characters, I mean, especially him and Auntie Ah, basically say that they accuse Woman of dying kind of her own volition. I don't really think they're implying that she's committing suicide by, like that there's an overdose or anything like that involved. It seems to have more to do with like her will to live. But whether that's in the face of an illness or not, we know that it's fast in coming. She talks about how like just 1 year previous, she was in Paris traveling. I think at one point her husband brings in a visa bill to kind of talk to her about her spending. And she says, isn't it crazy? Just one visa bill ago, I was out shopping, which I think is a incredibly insightful way to talk about time in like the contemporary world. Like that moment to me just sticks out. The idea of like something being measured one visa bill ago, I mean, it's just crazy. So it does seem to be something surprising and fast onset. The very beginning of the play, the negotiation between Scarecrow and Woman is about whether she was trying to get west, I think to where she's from originally, maybe on the sea, it seems like. And Scarecrow saying, actually, you were going south and you were confused. But there's a small story told about how when her husband found her, she was like lying under a statue outside. It's a little unclear how real that story is, but it might imply that she ran away or tried to escape whatever, this sort of situation that she's found herself in, and that maybe has to do, or maybe was the result of a diagnosis, or maybe the something about the travel brought on an illness. The truth is that it's just a mystery, and I think, I mean, it's safe to say, sort of beside the point. Why is she dying? Unsure,
Yeah.
but she is, and it's very clear from the beginning. There's no way out of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this sort of sudden death that arrives long before, like, maybe air quotes, it should.
Yeah, I mean, she's got young
before.
children. She's not dying of natural causes in old age. That seems clear.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, like, the sort of shock of that sort of creates this like, I guess it's a slow realization of it, but like the stakes feel higher, and you start to realize how high the stakes are, of like, but it's inverted stakes, right? It's not like, if we figure this out, there's going to be more life. If we it's rather like, if we figure this out, maybe we get clarity. Maybe, like, it's sort of like you have to try to like figure out what the stakes are, as much as they are like kind of clearly there and getting pulled out of her in a pretty like high pressure situation.
Some of the stakes that they negotiate have to do with what woman is leaving behind for or with the living. There's a really, I think, just an incredibly brilliantly written negotiation between woman and him, so this husband and wife characters, and he talks about how she has a duty. I think the phrase is to leave him softly. In other words, now that she's dying, she's revealing these things about their life and marriage, that she was unhappy, that she cheated on him a number of times. Now, he also cheated on her, so that's not like the betrayal it sounds like, but that she's revealing all of this stuff to him. And in fact, in Act 2, writes him a fairly provocative and sharp letter about the way he treated her, the way that whatever he did in context of her life, that she feels was unjustified or unwarranted. And his point is, you're gonna be dead, and we're gonna have to live with this, us and myself and the children. You have a responsibility to be generous, to be kind, to be soft, is his phrase, in your dying. And that becomes, to me, one of the questions about, like, the broader world questions of the play. Like, what duty do the dying have to the living? I mean, that's who asks that question. That's a fascinating question.
Right. And I think that's very an astute observation, because I think Scarecrow represents what duty do you have to yourself in the dying. And that letter that you describe, it's the woman starts that letter sort of in a little bit more of maybe perhaps the posture of softly dying, kind of describing life and describing things, describing what she wants.
She starts out the letter. Scarecrow has sort of blackmailed her into writing this letter at all. And woman starts the letter by calling her husband darling. And which, I mean, by my reading of the play, up until this point, I would not think that they would call each other darling.
Right.
Obviously, they don't have a very happy marriage. And Scarecrow, like, forces her to cross it out. So yeah, I think that's a good, like, very specific example of that. Starting the letter starts in that kind of dying softly tactic or mode.
Yeah, for sure. And Scarecrow eventually, like, draws her more into this, like, dictates part of the letter that is much more blistering, especially towards him. And to be clear, when him comes in and talks about this softly dying stuff, he comes in and, like, the knowledge is there that he's having an affair. And he's like, forgive me for that, because you have to let me, like, I have to live with this. So forgive me, softly die, as I'm asking for forgiveness for this.
Again, what's real and what's not in the play is somewhat confused at times, intentionally confused. But it does seem like at one point she says, did you just come, like, right now from seeing her? So I assume that's his mistress. And he's like, yes.
Are you about to see her again? Yes, right after this. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good thing to note as we chuckle about that. This play is full of dark humor.
Yes.
And like plays like if when played well, it contains this like kind of like laugh out loud funny dark humor mixed with this conversation about betrayal and death and life unlived. So all those things are kind of held together in this sort of like, yeah, weirdly darkly comedic
Yeah, I
discussion
mean,
on
this
death.
is truly gallows humor in the
Yeah, yeah.
very sense that, like, death is the subject of this play. This is a play about dying. I mean, but in
Mm-hmm.
no uncertain terms, no confusion, no alternate readings. This
Right.
is a play about what it means to die. And based on that, what that causes you to believe about, or to analyze, or to reinterpret about the way that you've lived. So it's a play about life and death. Marina Carr says that in many, many interviews. And the way to get at that is through this fairly irreverent, playful, humorous tone. And in that way, that is like definitionally gallows humor. Death is
Right.
the subject. We get at it through the funny, right? I can't remember who said this. I should have tried to come up with the source of this quote before the conversation. But somebody out there, and so at some point in the past, has said something like the play. Now, I don't think they're talking about this play in my memory, but they're talking about comedy and tragedy in general. They talk about how like the play or the story is very, very sad, which of course means that it's very funny,
Right.
right? I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
is this play could be honestly unbearable to watch
Sure.
if
Yeah.
not for, right, I mean, like, what, it's an hour, it's probably a 90-minute play, something like
Mm-hmm.
2-hour play. I don't think the woman ever leaves her bed. So
Right.
like there's very little like blocking and movement. This is a play of
Mm-hmm.
conversations. We talked about Mothers and Sons, right? Terrence McNally's film critic friend said that theater is just people sitting around and talking. this
Right.
this play is just people sitting around and talking. And
For
if
sure.
they were just talking for 2 hours about dying and regret, like that would be nearly unwatchable. I, like who
Yeah.
wants to do that? But Marina Carr has written a play that is full of crazy mythic imagery. That helps. And that is full of this irreverent playfulness that
Mm-hmm.
makes the play a totally different experience.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that is baked into the relationship between woman and Scarecrow. The way that they talk to each other, both about life and death, I think is like the vibrant heart of this play and the fun of the mystery of this play, trying to figure out who Scarecrow is. And I think the way that they are able to talk about life and death with each other and the sort of like strange guardian relationship that
Yeah.
Scarecrow has with
Sometimes
woman.
guardian, sometimes prosecutor, right? Like
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
very, very back and forth. And also not always involved in every part of her life. So Scarecrow
Mm-hmm.
is her, but they talk about moments that Scarecrow is like somehow left out of or
Right.
prevented from being a part of it. So
Mm-hmm.
not exactly her.
Yeah. It's fascinating to like I feel like there's lots of ways that you could imagine Scarecrow, right? Like you could imagine Scarecrow like in an older sense of things. You could imagine Scarecrow as sort of a guardian angel, right? Perhaps the one who like keeps death back and is your better angel, or maybe in this situation like your more self-actualized angel.
Yeah, some sort of like creature, supernatural figure on the shoulder type of
Mm-hmm.
figure. I will say there's a great moment. It's only like 3 or 4 pages into the play, so this is very early. It's clearly a way for Marina Carr to help us understand what Scarecrow is, because up to if you just start the play and you don't know anything about it, they just I believe the play is designed such that they both appear to just be regular humans.
Mm-hmm.
That this is a woman in bed clearly dying, another woman, they're talking about life. There's not necessarily like oh, that's a supernatural spooky angel ghost monster figure next to her. Now there is a spooky crazy angel death figure in the wardrobe, but we
Yeah.
don't I don't know that we know that about Scarecrow. We certainly don't know what the relationship is, and maybe we never do. But Marina Carr does this really, really great, very specific thing early in the play. It's part of their negotiation. They're arguing about whether or not Scarecrow is going to turn on this particular music that woman wants to have played. And as a way to get what she wants, so as a tactic in their negotiation, again, just really good dramatic writing, woman says, if you don't do what I want, I'm going to stop breathing. And then that Scarecrow doesn't do what she wants. So woman starts holding her breath, and Scarecrow also then can't breathe. And there's this scene where both of them nearly pass out or die or something to that effect. I mean, woman's very, very ill. So the idea that that might kill her, I don't think is out of bounds. But the point is that in the context of their negotiation, as a tactic, Marina Carr gives us this thing that makes us go, oh, they're the same person somehow.
Yeah.
Her holding her breath makes Scarecrow also not be able to breathe. So there's some kind of supernatural, by that I just mean beyond or above natural, thing happening here. They're the same thing somehow.
Yeah, which is like the kind of one of the main pieces of evidence against the like, this is like a separate supernatural being.
Right, like I don't know that that's how guardian angels work. Not that I really know how guardian angels work, but
right. And so then you're sort of entering into a little bit more of this like maybe alter ego, or to again a little bit archaic thing, perhaps a more recent thing, like what about like parts work? Like this is another part of yourself that is showing up in the room, another manager who is in the room, that like you can go into all sorts of interesting ways with that, of like this is a really significant part of herself that is with her on this dying day as she processes her life and gives it time in the light to kind of talk about their life the whole time as well.
Yeah, it's whatever Scarecrow is in the story, which we'll maybe talk a little more about here in a second. There's no doubt that in the mechanics of what the play is doing, like in the dramaturgical structuring, the Scarecrow is what we call split subjectivity, taken the interior life of one person and made it two people. Drama especially relies a lot on split subjectivity, more than other forms, because if you're just going to write the story of a woman dying as prose, now the split subjectivity is used in prose often, obviously, but not like drama. And the reason is, of course, in prose writing, you can just write she thought. Right. And then you can write her thoughts out on the page, and she can have differing thoughts and contradictory thoughts, and she can think back and forth to herself and work things out. Prose, it's really easy in prose to uncork the top of a character's head and show you what's going on in their internal life. In drama, either film or plays, that's very difficult to do, because there's no way to reveal what's going on inside of a person unless you figure out a way to bring that outside of the person, because that's all we see as the audience, is the outside of people. We don't get to go inside their heads like we do in prose. So in drama, you often get this tactic of, I'm going to take the interior life of a person and make that another person, so that the character can think and negotiate and attack and bribe and work on themselves, so that all that interior monologue can be represented as dialogue. Because that otherwise you have to do, and Shakespeare does this very effectively, characters can maybe step down stage and just tell us what they're thinking. That's also a strategy. But this split subjectivity dialogue strategy, very, very common in drama and used so effectively here.
Yeah, it's used very effectively to kind of tell the interior life of this character and talk about it in really interesting ways. And then additionally to sort of continue to evaluate how woman decides to show up in the world on an exterior level as well. We get kind of a commentary track in some of these scenes that runs as woman is talking to Auntie Ah or to him. We have Scarecrow in the room being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're doing this again. Like, like you have that continuing beat of like an whatever the interior monologue is of this character showing up in the room and speaking it out, even as a woman makes counter choices, or sometimes follows the advice of Scarecrow, or the leanings of Scarecrow with her relationship with these external people.
Yeah, I've collected a couple of different quotes and stuff, some from the script, some from interviews about what Scarecrow is exactly. Let me just share them and see what you think of these, Jackson. So, one point in the middle of the play, woman and Scarecrow are talking about one of the men that woman had a relationship with in the past, an extramarital relationship, but again, her husband did too. So I don't think that's quite the betrayal that it seems. And she's talking about this particular man, I guess, was really in love with her and bought her an incredible diamond ring. They're talking about why she didn't go with him, why that wasn't a choice she made, etc. Scarecrow says, he loved you more. He loved me. He saw past your tattered hide. He saw you as you should be seen. He saw me and he loved me. But you couldn't handle that, jealous surface bitch that you are. You'd sooner listen to that barbarian murder Chopin than live and let me live too. So there seems to be an insinuation there that Scarecrow is like woman as she should have been, or some
Mm.
alternate, more bold, more life grabbing version of woman that some people can see through woman too.
Yeah. Yeah. This, like, I don't know, maybe more. Yeah, it's that's such a complicated zone, right? Like it'd be interesting to say like a more earnest, or more like what she envisioned herself to
Yeah,
be.
less performing society's expectations, like a more
Mhm.
true interior version of herself,
Yep,
something
yep.
like that. So okay, so
Mhm.
here's an interview that Marina Carr did for the Pittsburgh International Classic Theater. She's being asked, what is Scarecrow? Carr says, she is that voice we carry within us all the time, those 150 voices that we live with, that are great company and carry you through life. The voice that questions you, the voice that loves you, the voice that hates you, the voice that argues with you, your voice of regret, your voice of compassion, your voice of cruelty. She's sort of all of those things, and yet that doesn't define her either. So there's the implication that Scarecrow is not one thing, but kind of all the interior life or lives that we
Mhm.
have that occupy our thinking.
Yeah. That brings up sort of like a really interesting so if we run with that for a second, like all your interior selves, like your, or maybe your alternate selves, or however you want to think about that. More parts work. We won't go into that today. The it's like that is a fascinating thing to think about, that is what holds you as you die, because that
Yes,
last
yes.
that last scene is like really touching, like after the kind of like horrifying reveal that like Scarecrow is also the Crow of Death, and then this sort of like clinical exit interview which
And
feels like,
really
oh.
brutal. I mean, she's dipping her
Yeah.
feather into woman's blood, and it's like apparently painful.
Mm-hmm. Yep. After those, there's the moment where woman actually dies, and it is this, like, she like dies in Scarecrow's arms.
And
This.
especially because her husband was just in the room and they
Yeah.
had kind of reconciled, it seems like, in the narrative, what narrative there is in this play. And he had gone to get champagne. Apparently, she had said that she wanted to die with champagne. So he said, I'll go get it. And he leaves the room to get it. And we're waiting on him to come back. And
Yeah.
while he's gone, she dies not in her husband's arms or any
Mm-hmm.
living person's arms, but in the arms of this other her, this interior thinking her.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's like a scary thing to think about almost. This play
Yeah.
does a good job at like being in awe
Although,
and
is it like,
scariness.
I will say, because I mean, if we just take for granted, and I think it seems obvious, that Scarecrow is her, then really what she's doing is dying alone, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's really, woman dies alone. Her husband leaves the room to go get the champagne, and while he's gone, she dies alone instead of surrounded by her friends and family, as many of us, dream of dying someday, right? And so that could be horrifying. This like
Yeah.
lonely isolation. So what Marina Carr potentially gives us alternatively is this version of dying alone that is not lonesome,
Mm-hmm.
right? In the arms of another body. It just happens to be like a non-real body, I guess.
Right, an unreal body that is sort of you.
And also dressed as a crow.
And also dressed as a representation of death. Yeah, there are so many like facets of this. Like the weird thing about this play, you said this in the. I want to give you the chance to say this on the show, Jacob, because you said this as we started. This play like has like so much to talk about, but also like that it's sort of like sometimes ephemeral to talk about it.
Well, right. So, I mean, of course, as I said in the context, Marina Carr very influenced by Beckett and Yeats, and a lot of the if you're trying to talk about a Beckett play, you're sort of trapped between there's not enough to talk about because the narrative is so sparse, and there's too much to talk about because every line carries this like well of meaning, both in context and by itself. I mean, I have a habit in my life of I keep, now I have 3 or 4 different notes documents because I filled them up. I keep quotes of things as I read. They inspire me, they influence me, they allow me to look back. I keep quotes. I mean, I think I have like 8 quotes from this play as I was reading. Like, you know, the last novel I read, I think I have like 1. And in this like 90-minute, 2-hour play, I have like 8 quotes. So every line carries this incredible depth. And at the same time, because narratively they're so sparse, both this play as a kind of reanimation, recontextualization of the kind of stuff that Beckett was doing. It's a challenging sort of straddling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That you could zoom into any one page of this script and even any one line of the script and have plenty to talk about, write a paper about, sometimes like grieve about.
Yeah.
And like really wonder about the connection to your own stories. We're coming down to the end of our particular time on this episode today, but we would love to continue this conversation with all of you out there in podcast land. If you have read this play, been in this play, interacted with this play in any way, and are looking for other people to chat about, we'd love to be a hub of that for you. You can find us on the socials at the username at NoScript Podcast. We also have a Gmail, noscriptpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on any of those sites. We'd love to keep talking about Woman and Scarecrow with you.
If you enjoyed this conversation and the other conversations in our season so far, we do encourage you to recommend us to your family, your friends, anybody you know that likes conversations about writing, about characters, about theater, themes, all that kind of stuff. Send them our way. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, all the places you get your podcasts. You can also like our Facebook page, and a link to the new episode appears every Monday when we publish, including next Monday when we're back with another great conversation about another great script. Until then, I'm Jacob here with Jackson. Thanks for joining us for No Script.